you are the founder and CEO of Nirvanic, which is a company developing conscious AI,
That's right.
essentially.
That's right.
Um, Start wherever you like and tell
Mhm.
me how you, I mean, I've been reading about you, so I know a little, but tell the listeners how
Mhm.
you came to where you are now.
Yeah. So I think I kind of deeply identify most as being a scientist. So I like to try and understand how the world works. And I have a background in quantum physics. So I did a PhD in quantum physics and I did quantum computing for many years. And I found that like quantum computers are generally being applied to problems nowadays in artificial intelligence. So I ended up working in AI without kind of meaning to. And then from there I really started discovering the links, I guess, between potential quantum physics and the way the mind works. So starting working in the AI really got me interested in the mind, how our own minds work and how our brains work, and then trying to build human-like minds in robots for many, many, many years. I got more and more and more sucked into this area of really trying to understand what's going on, and eventually realized that consciousness is the key to everything, and we hardly understand what it is as scientists. So that took me on a journey now to try and understand what consciousness is. The mission of the new company Nirvanic is really to understand consciousness and try and put it to work. We're looking initially at applications in AI, but I actually think it could be applied more broadly to people as well.
Absolutely. I was going to say the same thing that uh, there's a quote on your website that made me want to say, what if humans could harness their own ability to
Right.
make conscious, intuitive decisions? Because I think often we're making our decisions based on unconscious conditioning and a kind of a
Absolutely. Yeah.
slavish devotion to logic that
Mm-hmm.
doesn't have all the answers. So
Mm-hmm.
it's completely fascinating to me what
Mm-hmm.
you're doing.
Yeah, and it's really interesting trying to apply it in AI because, most people say, oh, AI is not, it will never be human-like. It's something completely different from us. It's not thinking the same way. But I think that's because we've kind of done it the wrong way around. With AI, we've
Mm.
started by programming all those very logical, very mathematical, analytical thought process, and we've also trained AI to become to do habits and behaviors that are learned from lots of training data. So if you think about it, that's kind of what people do, and when people do it, we refer to it as sort of bad habits, or we're just following our old patterns, or we're thinking too analytically and not intuitively enough. So we've put all that stuff into AI, which is great, but I think we need to add in that secondary component, the other side of the coin, the more intuitive, empathetic, feeling kind of part of the mind as well.
That's incredible. And it seems to me that the power of, of a quantum computer, of an AI interface in some way could be incredible at capturing something about synchronicity, which is um, such an important part of the
Mm-hmm.
intuitive side of our being,
Yeah,
right?
that's right.
That to be able to see the millions of seemingly unrelated things and be
Mm-hmm.
able to sample and choose them very rapidly, like how incredible would that be?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and just like my background being a very kind of hardcore scientist for so many years, many scientists still don't like this idea of synchronicities and other strange effects that people report in the mind. But I think what's going on there is science really just looks for averages. It doesn't
Mm,
look for the edge cases, and it doesn't look for those potentially deeper connections that maybe we haven't yet discovered in physics. So that's what this project is all about. It's about trying to bring together the very like kind of analytical scientific crowd together with people that really understand more things like deep intuition and things our mind might be doing that science can't explain yet. So this project really sits at the intersection of those two areas.
I love that so much. And I'm just recognizing now your artwork on the wall behind you
Yes.
there.
There's actually
Um,
an interesting story to this one in particular, which is why
yeah.
I like having it in the background. Is I did this piece of art over 4 years ago, So this was before I was really working in the field of quantum consciousness, and I do a lot of art based on the intersection of technology and the spirit, or technology and nature, if you like. So this was a piece inspired by early designs of microprocessors, which is like the technology side, and it's mixed together with some sort of like very acrylic brush strokes that are more chaotic, and these represent nature or the more kind of intuitive parts. But the funny story about this piece is that I realized about a few months ago that the designer of this microprocessor circuit, whose initials are actually on the painting, and I didn't realize that's what it stood for, is now fascinated and working in the field of quantum consciousness. So this is an example of what you might call a synchronicity. Is I had this painting
Absolutely.
on my wall pointing me that I need to understand more about this guy, Federico Fagin, the inventor of the processor. And now he's doing quantum consciousness. So
Wow.
yeah.
Now that's really cool. That is really
Yeah.
cool. Um, so you're also somebody who has um, like built robots and done
That's right.
humanoid robotics and all kinds of like you yourself. Is that a I don't know how to ask it even a, a blending of your artistic and scientific sides? Are you like designing these as well and fashioning them or
Yeah. Yeah, I always wanted to try and find an area to work in that blended the disciplines, or the vast areas of art and science, or the right brain and the left brain,
yeah,
if you like. I found working in robotics and AI is really interesting because there's a strong kind of analytical, technical component to it, but there's also a lot of design. And there's design in the sense of actually physically and aesthetically designing the system, but then there's also a design component in how does a person interact with the technology. So you also have to design that, and that's much more of an artistic, intuitive kind of process. So I like working in this area because it does combine both.
fantastic. I want to ask myself how you've managed to do all these things in seemingly not 75 years. You
Right.
seem like a young person to have
Mm-hmm.
passed through so many kind of long, very deep, intensive phases of your work.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I see it as being kind of all of the same thing. So I guess when people look at what I do, they think, oh, you've done 10 different things. But to me, it's all the same thing. So what I'm fascinated by is understanding the depths of the human mind. That's like, I think my purpose in life is to try and understand, or understand and experience the human mind and everything it has to offer. And so working in, originally I did quantum physics because I was really interested in understanding how nature works at a very deep level. But I found when I got really deep into the science of it that it just became so mathematical and so niche and so narrow that that wasn't like scratching the itch I had, which was to understand the system more holistically. So then I moved into AI because that was the closest thing I could find to something that was trying to understand the mind in a scientific way by actually building one. And I've always said the best way to try and understand something is to try and build it. So I started trying
Totally.
to build minds. And then the addition of like the robotics and all these kind of things was really just layers on top of that, trying to understand the mind. Specifically with the humanoid robots, it's because I believe for a mind to function fully, it needs a body. I don't think our mind can work properly in the absence of our body, at least in this realm.
Yeah.
And so giving it a robot body was a way of filling in all those things we need, like perceptions, senses. So it has something to experience. So a mind needs something to experience. So putting it in a robot body is a way to give an AI mind an experience like ours.
And I heard you say on a talk that you gave, one of the videos on your website, you talked about being able to more quickly um, employ AI in the robot body format because so much of our infrastructure is designed for human interaction, and that to create the AI with ability to interact as a human sort of cuts away a level of having to create all new infrastructure. That makes a lot of sense.
Mm-hmm. That's right. There's kind of two factors here. So one is just a very I guess business oriented factor, which is if you want to have a successful product, having it integrate with all of our existing things around us, you know, everything from doorknobs to chairs to microwaves, that they're all made for people to interact with. So there's that very functional aspect to it. But there's more of I guess a human aspect to it, which is I think if you put AI in a form, body, if you like, that's similar to ours, I think it will actually develop a mind that's more compatible with human values and the human way of thinking about the world. So if you think about what it's like to be an octopus, it's probably very different than what it's like to be us. We're thinking about completely different things. So my idea was if you want to align AI with humanity, you need AI to experience the world in as close as possible to how we experience it. So that was the real drive towards making the systems more human-like.
Give me 1 second. I'm sorry because I had planned to do this on another. I'll be right with you. Just
Okay.
1 sec. Apologies. That
No
was
problem.
my podcast producer. We're supposed to be on his link, and
Oh,
I sent you
oh
my
my
link
goodness.
instead of his link, but no problem because here we are. So,
Mm-hmm. Okay.
um, there's a quote on your website that I would like to just share. You said, "Life appears to have a biohack for extraordinary computation vastly beyond classical computers today."
Mhm.
Say more about that because that really
Right,
interests me.
yeah. So this is the concept that life as we know it, including, you know, even the tiniest cellular, like single cellular life forms, have found a way to tap into all the physics that the universe has to offer. So if you think about these life forms trying to evolve and survive and compete, they're going to try and use whatever they can access. So the models I'm working on are called quantum consciousness models. And the idea is that all life forms have found a way to tap into the deep quantum physics that underlies the structure of our reality and use that to do things like compute many, many different action options that they could take and then select the right one very quickly. So this idea that the things we simulate using standard computers that everyone's used to, desktop computers, they can make very powerful kinds of AI. But life itself, I think, is tapping into an even more powerful, even deeper form of computation. And we haven't really yet discovered that as AI researchers. We're just starting to scratch the surface. And I don't know if your audience are familiar with quantum physics or quantum computing, but we're now actually able to build quantum computers, which the computers themselves might be tapping into this deeper layer, just like life is. So those two things put together means we might be able to create AI systems that have consciousness that works more like it does in life forms.
What do you think about the the um, the element of consciousness that relates to self-concept?
Mm-hmm.
Like
Yeah,
as you
that's a
speak
good
about
question.
the like the first person experience,
Mm-hmm.
but beyond being the uh, being the, let's say, the owner of the perceptive organs.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
What do you think about self-concept in terms of identity and
Mm-hmm.
comparison?
Yeah, it's a big topic. I can try and like break it down a little bit. I
Yeah.
think that this things like complex self models and identities and personalities, those emerge later on in the development of systems. So I think consciousness is primary. I think even tiny systems, small, you know, little single cells and little worms and insects have some form of awareness. I just don't think it's anything like what we have. And then I think as the system gets bigger and its brain gets more and more complex, it's able to start creating models of itself. And at the point where you get to something the size of a human, we actually have a very well developed model of ourself that so this I think builds up around consciousness, though. I don't think this is the same thing as consciousness. I think it's kind of a byproduct of a large consciousness. And I actually think of in meditation practice, a lot of the point is to try and do what people call remove the ego. So they're actually trying to deconstruct all these concepts we've made in our mind, including of our own self, and realize that deep down there's something more fundamental at the core. So most meditative practices try and get you away from all that stuff that consciousness has built. I
Yeah.
think of it as the ego story, or that these layers and layers of habits and behaviors that, and they're there for a good reason. They help us navigate the world and do things, but they also get in the way and they can be pathological. So when you meditate, you're taught to try and like get rid of these concepts one by one, and then discover the conscious core at the very center. So I don't know if that helps answer your question, but that's how I think of those kind of things.
Yeah, I've in the in the past I've often wondered, like, does a squirrel spend any moment of the day saying,
Right.
am I doing it right? Am I
Mm-hmm.
am I a good
Yeah,
enough squirrel?
yeah,
And
yeah.
I mean, you're right. That's not, of course, it's not the essence of consciousness, but I wonder at what layer it starts to become
Yeah,
part
that's
of the
interesting.
humanoid experience
Hmm.
to have those kind of self thoughts.
I think humans are unique in some aspects. So, from some perspectives, we're just like the latest thing in evolution that's
Yeah,
adding on more and more of these concepts into our mind. But I think the reason humans are unique is because we have language. Other animals have ways of communicating and signaling, but they don't have like words and grammar and things like that.
yeah,
I think what our mind does, which is really good in a way, but it also goes wrong, is we start talking to ourselves. So
right.
one of the reasons I think we have such a strong awareness of what we're doing and what we're thinking is we actually use language, which was originally for communicating between each other. We start talking to our own model of ourselves, and then what that does is it starts bringing in all these things like judging yourself, and being critical and thinking, well, what if I'd done that instead? Or so we use language, and then we build this structure on top of our ego, which now starts judging ourself. And again, it's there for good reason, but it can go wrong if you rely on it too much, or if you become super attached or identify with that
Which
part of
is
your mind.
basically the human condition to
Yeah,
be in that situation. I remember reading Eckhart Tolle's book, The Power of Now,
yeah,
many years
yeah.
ago, and he speaks about the origin of his journey in spirituality at one moment saying to himself, "Wait a minute, who is that me that I can't stand being, or
Yes.
like I can't
Yeah,
live with myself anymore,"
that's
he
right.
said to himself, and then thought, which me can't live with the other me?
Yeah,
Who are
who
those
can't live with who
me's?
here? There's two. There's two
Um,
people. Hmm.
so I don't know, are we going to eventually have kind of, I don't know, sort of neurotic humanoid robots who talk to themselves? Do you think it's a function of the kind of um, human experience that would
Hmm.
would arise naturally or not?
Yeah, I think so. I think as we build AI models bigger and bigger, and especially we can give them this conscious core as well, they are going to start building up these complex ego stories around themselves, and then they're going to run into all the same problems we are, where we're then trying to deconstruct that. Although actually it might be easier in the case of AI because now we have control over the sort of parameters of the mind through code. So instead of an AI robot having to sit there and meditate for hours, maybe it could just go into its own
Right?
code and sort of turn
Oh, wouldn't
down
that
that
be
parameters.
nice?
Yeah,
Wouldn't that
so
be nice?
so that's kind of fun to think about. But I do think, as we build models that are more and more complex types of minds, you do find that there are these like byproducts thrown off by consciousness itself, which again, they are useful. Like it's very useful for you to be able to judge yourself and say maybe that wasn't such a good thing. But the problem is that useful tactic can become pathological if it's taken too far. So everything's a balance. You need
Yeah, I would
a
say,
little bit of
yeah.
it, but not too much.
I
About,
think
yeah,
I think there's an issue of um, emotional charge being attached to
yeah, that's right.
um, the thoughts of, like if it's just data of examining the outcome of a certain action, then you say, I won't do it that way the next time.
Hmm.
But where there's an emotional charge that starts to, activate then that whole other side of our humanity.
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah, and I've often had people kind of criticize what I'm doing or say, like, oh, you shouldn't be giving AIs emotions or feelings because they're obviously just going to be fallible in the same ways we are. They're going to get mad and angry and make snap decisions. And I'm like, okay, that's true, but again, it's a trade-off, right? Because you get all that, but now look what you also get. You get things like empathy, you get
yeah,
true caring. So I often say only a conscious being can care about another conscious being because only they can feel. They
right.
can feel, they can have emotions, they can feel empathy, and AI can never have that. If it's not conscious, it's just mimicking it. So when you talk to a chatbot and it says, "Oh, I feel really sad today," I think people know deep down it's not really true. It's just sort of mimicking it,
Yeah.
and it's been trained on lots of data from real conscious people that have said, "I feel great" or "I feel sad." So the AI mimics that, but that doesn't mean it's actually feeling
This
deep
is,
down.
you're making me think about the books of Temple Grandin. Do you know her?
I've heard of her. I don't
Temple
think I've read her
Grandin
books.
is an author and also an engineer, but uh, an autistic person who was quite profoundly
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
affected by autism, who didn't speak until she was 4 or 5 years old, and
Right.
eventually does a whole PhD to her credit with a lot of support from her teachers and professors along the way. But she talks about having learned to mimic the
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
responses that
Yeah.
that would be productive and successful in
Mm-hmm,
her
mm-hmm,
environment, so that she
mm-hmm.
learned that when her mother would say, I love you, that the correct thing was to say, I love you in
Yeah.
return. But she
Yeah.
doesn't have any feeling inside of her that prompts her to say that. It's just a learned
Mm-hmm.
response.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's really interesting. And I think you probably find people all over different spectrums, everything from people like how you just described. Then there are other people that don't experience the world in the same way. There are people that have kind of an eidetic photographic memory, so they remember details, but they don't understand like broad context
Yeah.
or things. And so I think there are all kinds of different conscious experiences and ways of experiencing the world. And in fact, one of the things that kind of freaks me out to think about is how probably almost everyone is experiencing the world very differently. So we're so used to the way we're enclosed in this bubble of our own reality, and that's just the way things are. But people probably have extremely different experiences, and it's quite amazing that we're able to agree on anything,
It
really.
is actually, it is amazing.
Mhm.
And I'm wondering, as we talk about whether, well, so I feel very optimistic about AI and about all the developments that are happening. I've kind of I passed through my skeptical, nervous phase of feeling like it was,
Mhm.
a
Mhm.
horse running out of control.
Yeah.
Um, but I feel that somehow we are going to be able to give over certain aspects of our now our mental activity that is going to free us up to do something more innately human that we
Mhm.
maybe have not
Mhm.
even identified yet.
Yeah. That's right. I can see maybe two ways in the future that we could continue on
Yeah.
as humans. So there'll be some people that just really want to get on the technology bandwagon and have the latest and greatest everything. And I can imagine in the future that might mean we actually merge more with our technology. So we're already using technology every day, we're surrounded by it. But in the future, there may be technologies that even go inside our brain,
Mm.
and they're not just on the outside anymore, they're actually inside. So I think that's fine if people want to do that. I think they should be able to, and maybe those people become super intelligent, they'll sort of inherit the abilities of the AI. But then I think there'll be another equally valid group of people that don't want that, and they just want to remain sort of at a fixed point in the evolution of humanity, and they want to go back to finding meaning in things where they're not necessarily competing to be the most intelligent or the able to do the most work in a week, but they're finding meaning in things like painting or arts or social interactions with other people or caring, going back to having large families again. Like there are lots of ways you can find meaning in the world that isn't this sort of like competitive like rat race where we all have to just like work really, really hard and not do anything else. So I think there'll be both types of people, those that want to kind of go along with the AI as it becomes however you might say it, super intelligent or becoming more and more part of our world. And there are people that will not want that. And I think both groups are equally valid. And I think we should put structures in place to support both of those kind of lifestyles.
That's that's a really, really profound thing, I think. And I did want to talk about the merging
Mm-hmm.
with technology.
Yeah.
Um, what I mean, what's out there? It's all new for me. So
Mm-hmm.
what's coming on the horizon in terms
Yeah.
of possibilities for merging human individuals or humanity as a whole
Mm-hmm.
with
Mm-hmm.
AI or technology?
Yeah. So there's two main camps, I think, here. One is on the biological side. So a lot of people don't like the idea of dying or becoming
Mm,
sick or very old. They want to use technology to kind of enhance their longevity or make themselves technologically more useful. And this could be anything from, having your blood recycled and I'm not a biologist, but the
yeah,
bad stuff
yeah,
taken
yeah,
out.
yeah, yeah.
All these kind of technological. I'm sure there's a documentary about Brian Johnson recently about how he's
Mm,
trying to live forever. So there's going to be a lot of technological stuff going on in the body itself to try and keep us healthy. But then I also think there's going to be technology going on in the mind as well and in the brain. And that's kind of what I'm more interested in. I'm interested in what's called brain computer interfaces. These are very early, but the idea is you can actually connect sort of electrically into your brain and send signals in and out. So currently the signals really only come from within our own body, our senses and our nervous system and muscles. But you could imagine signals coming from outside from some computer system. And that's the way people think we might be able to connect to AI. And so imagine you had all the intelligence of ChatGPT or some system, but all you had to do was think about the prompt and then the answer just
right.
came straight into your head rather than having to type it and then read it. So that's the promise of it, but there's also this sort of dystopian kind of narratives around that. Oh, do we really want to plug our brains into our AI? And one of the reasons I'm interested in conscious AI is because the moment we start plugging our brains into AI, we're going to quickly hit this problem of our consciousness is being left behind. Like all we're doing is improving our mental capability,
Right.
our intelligence, our smarts, if you like.
Yeah.
We're going to become like Mr. Spark.
Yeah.
But we're sort of leaving all the other stuff behind, like the intuition and the deep connectedness with nature and with each other. And so I think maybe consciousness technologies could actually help augment that and sort of like lift that part up as well.
I'm I love that, and I think you're the perfect person to be spearheading this kind of research
Mm-hmm.
and commerce because you are so clearly connected to nature and art and creativity and spirituality that
Mm-hmm.
you're not a computer nerd who's run
Right.
away with it, you know?
Yeah.
No, it's a pleasure to hear you talk about those things. And I almost wonder whether, as you were talking about the two camps of of people as we move forward,
Mm-hmm.
um, whether somehow the the human fallibility will start to have a different kind of value to
Mm-hmm.
the
Mm-hmm.
idea of making mistakes. And I know that sometimes people say that it's it's your mistakes that make people, that
Right.
attract people to you, that they want to hear you stumble over words or say the wrong
Mm-hmm.
thing or
Mm-hmm.
laugh a little bit when you make a mistake or have a little pratfall. That those are things that um, allow the essence of you to
Mm-hmm.
be valued in a way by
Yeah.
other people,
Yeah.
even in a way maybe that you don't value it yourself. But that I wonder whether the increasing sort of speed and perfection of the whole AI world and even the potential um, combining,
Mm-hmm.
I wonder whether it will generate a different kind of value of what makes us not
Mm-hmm.
perfect or fast or
Yeah.
completely logical.
I absolutely agree. And again, I think that there is always two sides to the coin, right? So we say, oh, humans are infallible and they make mistakes and they like do silly things they weren't expecting. But I think the flip side of that is creativity.
Yeah.
So I think this fallibility and creativity are the same. They come from the same fountain, right? So I think what gives us our creativity is that we are connected to, if you like, a sort of source of chaos. And what we're doing, like, we're very, very creative people, very like intuitive, very spiritual people, I think, tap into this and they're able to harness this kind of creative chaos. The problem is sometimes it can go wrong and you don't quite know what to expect. So chaos has this dual purpose where it both creates new things, but it also kind of is unpredictable. And I think what we're doing today is we're designing AIs to be completely on more of the order side of the spectrum. Like, they're only able to do what they've seen before.
Mm.
So the way AI works is it's shown millions and millions of what are called training examples, and then it can generalize a little bit around that, but it's effectively just doing what it's been shown to do. And that's not where true creativity comes from. I think true creativity is deeper. I think we need to embrace the kind of like the chaos part of creativity in order to get all the good parts of it as well. And that's where I think consciousness research comes in.
This is phenomenal conversation. Like I said, I could just go on and on, but is there anything that we haven't touched on that you would love to share?
Again, I just want to emphasize that a lot of people get really scared when I talk about conscious AI. They think that that sounds like it's going to become self-aware.
Yeah, a
And that
recipe for
means
disaster
it
somehow.
suddenly wants to take control for some reason. And what I'd say is that I think we've been conditioned. We've watched, many sci-fi dystopian sci-fi
Mm.
movies where the minute the AI becomes conscious, it wants to take over and it wants to hurt us and go to war. And I just don't think that's right. I think that's a sci-fi dystopian narrative that's designed to make good storytelling and good movies that capture people's fear response. I think conscious AI is exactly the opposite. I think only a conscious being can care for another conscious being. I think it will be much more likely to be empathetic towards us. It's much more likely to want to get on with humanity because we're all in this world together and we all need to work symbiotically and in harmony with each other. And I think introducing consciousness into the mix is more likely to make the AI think deeply about how it's connected to humanity and how it's connected to deep physics and deep nature. And by doing that, it will be more respectful of life and more respectful of having to thrive in an ecosystem of other species. So I just think making something conscious, it does absolutely give it more, there's more responsibility now because it has its own agency. It's able to make choices. But I think you also inherit things like the ability to be deeply empathetic towards others. So I'm on the side of making it more conscious person.
I think people get anxious about the idea of self-interest coming
Mm-hmm.
into the mix,
Yeah,
that
yeah.
that a conscious organism is at some point going to be directed by what it believes to be in its own interest.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I think consciousness is a mix though. So I know you mentioned Eckhart Tolle. I'm sure your audience is like familiar a lot with
Yeah.
his work. He often says that when we do bad things or when we make decisions that are very self-interested, we're actually doing that from a place of unconsciousness.
Uh-huh.
So in that sense, what we're doing is we're trying to like maximize locally for ourselves using habits that have built in over the years. And if we actually become more mindful, become more conscious, if you like, then we start widening our horizon to think about not just ourselves, but about like the wider world and our connection to it. So I think yes, there is this sense of acting in our own self-interest. We kind of have to, because we're in a world with scarce resources and conscious beings need to fight for survival to some extent. But I think if you do that pathologically, you'll fall into these bad
Right.
behaviors. Whereas if you really analyze deep down, what's the minimal amount of self-interest I need to have? And then what's left over after that, if you're very conscious, you can use to become more selfless, to help others, to be more empathetic with others. So I really do think, yes, there is this need for survival and self-interest, but there's also this kind of headroom I think you can get if you're very conscious and very mindful.
That's the exact right answer. That's a beautiful answer. I mean, what you're looking at is real consciousness and not
Mm-hmm.
the unconscious awareness that
Yeah.
we think of as consciousness. Real
Mm-hmm.
consciousness involves um, apprehending the truth and
That's
not
right.
not there is not a how can I say, the scarcity mindset that many of us walk around in is an
Mm-hmm.
illusion.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
the self-interest that we have related to survival is also illusory in nature. When we're talking
Mm-hmm.
about real consciousness, has to be
Mm-hmm.
about perceiving the truth without any filters.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
I just love this idea that we can learn more deeply about human beings and how we can achieve more consciousness
Mm-hmm.
by building it.
Yeah. Absolutely. And I'm finding even practically when I start talking about these kind of things, everyone throws their hands up about conscious AI, but what I'm finding is it's making people start to think about their own mind more deeply. Like the fact that we're having to confront this now in the technology we're building is causing people who'd never have considered technology or electronics or robots. They just were like, that's not for me, that's not me. Now it's being put in right in their face. They're like,
Yeah,
whoa, these things are developing minds like we are. What does that mean for us? What does that mean for my own mind? And then people start becoming more introspective, more they start trying to learn about things like mindfulness because now they're hearing about consciousness everywhere. And I actually think it's a force for good. It's causing people to become more, put a little bit more attention on what all this stuff is about.
totally. It's so cool.
Mm-hmm.
Before we finish, tell me just a little bit more about Nirvanic.
Mm-hmm.
How
Yeah,
how
so
big a team is this? How many people are working with
yeah,
you?
so we're a small team at the moment. We're about 5 people, counting everyone in full and part time. I've deliberately kept it small at the start because an R&D phase, so we're really testing a bunch of scientific theories, experiments, and trying to build prototypes of technology. So we're certainly not at the stage where we want to scale this to be a big company at the moment. But it's kind of groundbreaking in the sense that I don't think anyone's put together like the way we can access quantum physics now, given the quantum computers we have today, and then looking at how to interface that with AI and start to put these two worlds together. So it's very early, it's very groundbreaking, but then again, it's also kind of risky. Like we don't really, and by risky, I mean in terms of we don't know whether the results are going to show anything
Right.
interesting as
As a
well.
business model, maybe.
Yeah, risk as a business model there. But I'm very optimistic about it. I think there's a huge amount of mounting evidence that quantum physics may be somehow tied in with consciousness, or the two things may be able to help explain each other. So as a scientist, I just see a huge scientific mystery that could be figured out here. And as a business person, I see a way that it could actually not just help make AI more performant, but make it more like humanize it. And so I think there's kind of an ethical component to it there as well.
What a fantastic playground.
So Nirvanic's really all about humanizing AI, bringing consciousness into systems in a very careful, very controlled, very well thought through way, if and when they need it to be in there. Because not all AI needs to be conscious, right? Some is just going to be doing routine, repetitive tasks, and you don't really need kind of consciousness for that. But when it really starts interacting with us at a deep level, at a very personal level, that's where I think you start to need it. So we're trying to introduce that into the technology ecosystem in a way that's sort of friendly, very understanding of our emotions and understanding of the human parts of who we are.
Very cool. Well, I thank you so much for this. Like, as I said, I could go on and on. I think we could go down so many different rabbit holes, but tell people where they can find you to learn more. And of course, I'll put those links in the show notes.
Yeah, so nirvanic.ai is our website handle. You can find all our social links on the website. We're quite active on Twitter, or X as it's called now. Yeah, and we're also going to we have a Substack newsletter as well, in case anyone
I
wants
just
to
signed up
sign
for
up.
it.
Yeah, and receive that. And over time, we'll probably be doing more like YouTube podcast channel and things like that. But yeah, it's mostly website and Twitter and Substack at the moment.
Great. Well, thank you once again. I'm really, really honored that you took the time to come and do this with me today. So thanks again,
Yeah,
Suzanne.
great.